I'm joined on the set by our international affairs commentator, Doug Herbert. What are the obstacles still lying in the way of a ceasefire?
Well, perhaps one of the most massive obstacles has just come through in the past few minutes. We have had reportedly a very declarative statement from Netanyahu that Israeli troops will at some point enter Rafah, the southernmost bastion, the last city still standing in Gaza, essentially, with or without a Gaza truce. This whole truce, at least from the U.S. perspective and a lot of the Arab nations, are built on the presumption that a truce would essentially put in abeyance any plans to invade a ground invasion of Rafah. That has been the big bogeyman here. And look, it underscores the overall contradiction dividing both Hamas on one side and Israel and its prime minister and his coalition on the other side. What does Hamas want? Hamas wants to be able to preserve itself in some way, shape, or form, perhaps as a fighting force, as a military force, when and if this war eventually ends. Israel wants exactly the opposite. It wants to obliterate Hamas. It wants to rout Hamas. It wants Hamas to no longer exist. So given those two extremely clashing objectives, go one level deeper. What does Israel want? Israel wants in any truce only a very short-term ceasefire. The initial phase would call for a ceasefire perhaps, no longer than 6 weeks, perhaps 40 days or so. Hamas wants just the opposite. It is hoping that this eventual truce will be the very first step en route to a permanent ceasefire. So there again, they have extremely clashing objectives. And I underline the point right now that Netanyahu is up against it with his coalition, notably his far-right security minister, who is dead set reportedly against the security deal and wants to go into Rafah, and his prime minister seems at this moment to be going along with him to echo those sentiments.
What about other Arab states, some of whom have expressed hope for a breakthrough? Saudi Arabia, for example, has a lot to gain or potentially to lose. What would be a best-case scenario for Saudi Arabia or for other Arab neighbors?
Well, a best-case scenario would be some sort of new all-inclusive Middle East peace structure, which would bring Saudi Arabia, which had been in the works trying to normalize relations with the U.S. and the West into the fold, along with potentially some other Arab states. This normalization of relations, bringing them into this what could be, you said best case scenario, so I'm taking it all the way out to the logical extension here, into this sort of tripartite alliance that would actually see Israel and Saudi Arabia and the United States all allied, all coalescing in a common cause. In Saudi Arabia's case, what they're hoping for is not just normalization of relations, but they want some sort of security guarantee from the U.S. Security guarantees a mutual defense deal, if you will, against the archenemy, Iran, which also happens to be Israel's archenemy, Iran. Pulling them into that. Right now, that is contingent on Saudi Arabia wants to work on a pathway to a Palestinian state. We know that is absolutely, for Benjamin Netanyahu and his far-right government, that is an absolute showstopper. That is a no-go. The plans, a pathway to a two-state solution, a Palestinian state coexisting side by side with Israel, for now, at least in the public statements from the Israelis, that is an absolute no-go. So that's a best-case scenario for the Saudis and Arabs, being drawn into this normalization with Israel, normal diplomatic relations, with security guarantees from the U.S., alongside Israel in a new sort of revamped Middle East of a completely new topography that doesn't look like to be happening very soon or imminently, to say the least.
All right, Doug, thanks for that. France 24's Doug Herbert.